Hello, and thank you for joining us for Service Awards versus Survival Awards, making service milestone celebrations more meaningful. This program is part of the SHRM webcast series. You can learn about upcoming and on-demand events from our e-newsletters and the webcast homepage at shrm.org/webcast. SHRM thanks AwardCo for sponsoring this program and this series of free webcasts for the HR community. With those bit of housekeeping out of the way, I'm pleased now to turn the webcast microphone over to Bronson Dameron, a content manager at AwardCo. Mr. Dameron, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Hello and welcome, everyone, to our webinar today. My name is Bronson, and I am hosting this webinar today with my friend Sam. I am the content manager for AwardCo, so I'm excited to be here and talk about how we can make service awards and service milestones more meaningful. I have been accused of being human before, and I think that's a pretty good accusation. And Sam is our VP of Marketing, and he joins us here today. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi there. Glad to be here. It's always a great opportunity to talk about service awards, recognition, rewarding human beings. Yes, also a human, not a zombie. We are going to have a very spooky survival and zombie-filled discussion today. So we just wanted to make sure everybody understood we're not workplace zombies yet, and hope to avoid that.
Yeah, definitely hope to avoid it. Like Sam mentioned, we're talking today about surviving the workpocalypse, how to make service milestones more meaningful. And as you see there on your slide, we've got a zombie there holding a 25-year service award. And like you said, Sam, this is going to be a little bit of a spooky flavor. But as we were kind of thinking about this, how we can say something meaningful about this subject, we thought about how so many times service awards are inadvertently turned into survival awards. Something like, hey, thanks for surviving 10, 15, 20 years with us. Here is an acrylic or some sort of award. And it's good. All service awards are good. They're well-meaning, they're well-intentioned, but we're going to talk about how we can maybe make them a little more effective and how we can avoid things or kind of combat things like the Great Resignation, for example. Some of you may have heard about that or read about that. And service awards are an important part of how we can engage our workforce and how we can help employees feel a little more alive at work as opposed to feeling like a zombie. So you might notice us kind of referring back to some of these spooky themes. And we will have a handout at the end. It's an ebook that has all of these things inside of it that we're going to talk about. We have six survival tips for you on how to make your service awards more meaningful. And so this ebook has those, so you can get those and you can kind of read through it and get all of the information again at the end. So we'll move forward here and talk about, an HR leader's service awards survival guide, how you can make service awards more meaningful in your own organization. So to start us out, we're going to give you a little bit of a statistic because everybody likes statistics, but they also help us kind of see a little bit and give us more insight. So this says 71% of organizations have some kind of service award program. This statistic is from something survey we did with HR.com, and where it was we sent it out to HR professionals about their recognition programs and about service awards. And we found that 71% of organizations, or roughly around there, have a service award program. And that's really good. It means that it's important, that a lot of people are doing it. And as a service award program, there are a lot of things we can do better with it because, unfortunately, some people, even though they're doing it, it's not quite effective. And Sam, there's another stat that we often refer back to from this survey that kind of shows the other side of that, right?
Right. So you can see here that, roughly 3/4 of companies out there have some kind of service award program. And I think at the heart of it, all of us understand, or at one point our organizations understood, that service awards are a retention and a loyalty play. We're trying to retain good talent and make it an exclusive club to be a part of, a 5-year and a 10-year and a 15-year. And we want to reward the loyalty that employees are showing us by giving them some reward in return. 71% of organizations have it. In the research that we conducted, 81% of those same respondents stated that their organization, the rewards and recognition in their organization is not highly effective or not at all effective. So that's 4/5, right? 4 out of 5 people, including the 3 of the 4 here who have a service award program, would say that their program is not effective. So there's a disconnect here, right? There's a disconnect between a lot of what HR leaders, rewards and recognition directors think, right? There's a disconnect between what they think their program is accomplishing and what the program is actually accomplishing. And we're really interested in diving into the why and the how. There's got to be a way to bridge that gap so that, like you said, service awards don't become just survival awards, and that they actually become true retention and loyalty plays in the organization.
Yeah. And as we continue talking about that, the first survival tip we have for this, how you can make it a retention and loyalty play, is to personalize the service award. Now, this might seem like a total no-brainer, right? Of course, you're going to try and personalize it, because that's what we try and do with all things. Like when you go and get a gift card from a store, if you're in a rush, you don't want to get one that's just blank, or you don't want to get one that you don't thereafter sign, with your name at the very least, to make it a little bit personal. The same thing goes for service awards. Now, a lot of times, like 71% of people, like that statistic said, have a service award program or have some sort of program in place, but it's not terribly effective according to the data we have. And so why do people do them? Well, it's because here's a business term for everybody. It's the lowest hanging fruit as far as recognition goes, right? It's one of the easiest things to do. Oh, you've been here for a certain amount of time? Great. Here's a little gift, a thank you. And also, cultures are just, I think humans are in general used to celebrating anniversaries. That's how we mark time. That's how we kind of gauge things, right? Like birthdays, right, Sam, or holidays, or anything like that. And that's one reason service awards are so powerful, or so why they're used so widely. So we talk about
and
sorry,
ahead. I mean,
okay.
got that Zoom delay going on, I'm sure. But you brought up birthdays, and I think it's a really easy concept for all of us to boil down, business concepts to real life situations, right? Where we each celebrate a birthday, but we've all received birthday gifts and birthday kudos, birthday well-meaning wishes that didn't hit right, that didn't land right, and didn't have the intended, consequence that maybe they were hoping for, the giver was hoping. It reminds me of the vampire and the pizza, right, Bronson?
Yep.
In that there's a slide that we created in this content that we've developed. Reading this off here, a lackluster and impersonal service award program can cause disillusionment and bitterness if employees don't feel truly valued for their time. And so you've got to ask yourself, why am I looking at a vampire and pizza here? Given to that spooky flavor, oftentimes we have this battle in HR between scalability and personability, right? How am I going to personalize every single service award across an organization when my organization is thousands of people wide? And we're going to talk about that. The tips that follow will address that. But let's just say you don't. Giving everyone in your organization a gift card to the pizza place in town, and it just happens to be a garlic heavy pizza place, doesn't appeal to the vampires in your organization, right? That can kill them. But let's just say, let's make it more realistic. You're giving, somebody a gift card to a store that they just don't care for, right? That happens, and you might be thinking that gift will hit and say, oh, they're going to feel totally grateful for that $100 gift card to this store. And they might be thinking, don't they know I'm a vegetarian? Don't they know I don't like this? Don't they know, right? And those are things we have to learn over time, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And like you said, Sam, about it causing disillusionment and maybe bitterness, it can also be a sign of an organization that's out of touch with their employees. And that can send the exact wrong message. That can be, rather than something you might feel is uplifting, it could be something that's like, oh man, they don't even know me. I've been here for a year or more and they don't even know me. So it can it can send the wrong message if we don't personalize it. I have a personal experience to share with this. I worked at a place one time, and I'm not going to give too much context to this because I think we'll give it later, but I was given an avocado for a service award, like a year. I'd been there for a year and I was given an avocado. And so hearing that story, you might be like, wow, you probably shouldn't work there anymore. It gave you an avocado. But the really cool thing about this was that it was totally personalized to me, because I tend to not eat a whole ton of sugar. I'm a little bit careful about my diet, and they knew that about me. And so instead of giving the traditional cupcake that they gave to everybody, they gave me an avocado. And I thought that was the coolest thing. So like, it doesn't take much effort at all to make it a little bit personal and to make a real connection with your employee base. So here's the survival toolkit for our survival tip number 1, to personalize. Learn about the person. If you have a huge organization, that might be a little difficult. So how do you do that? You can involve their manager and involve their team. They will definitely know more about the person than you might. You can discover their likes, their dislikes, if they like avocados, if they don't like garlic, like a vampire trying to eat a pizza or something. And then you can add a personal touch to every award, because that personal touch, whether it's a handwritten note or if it's just a gesture like an avocado, that means the world. And that can take a lackluster service award or milestone and make it awesome, make it memorable. I still remember that avocado, and that was 8 years ago, I think now. And it made a difference.
I love the final point that you have there. Add a personal touch. This doesn't mean that every single service award that you create has to be personalized to the person. There is an element of scalability here, but trust me, the higher the service award gets, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, if the only thing you know about the person is that they lasted 15 years at your company and you know their name and maybe their department, and they get, a service award that has their name, their service year, and their department on it, it's not going to feel very personal, and they're going to be wondering, does anybody here know me? Does anybody know what I value or what I could maybe like? 15 years is a long time to get to know someone, and so there's people around them, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and the other thing that you brought up that I kind of want to tie into our next tip, our next survival tip, is if the person feels unknown, one thing that you can do to help kind of make them feel like they're contributing, make them feel valuable, is you can tie the service award to performance. So there's survival tip number 2, tie the service award to performance. Now, a lot of times a service award, as if it's traditionally looked at, everybody gets it no matter what, then you're like, why would I tie it to performance? Everybody's going to get it no matter what. You're going to get it if you survive this long at a workplace. But the really cool thing that many organizations are missing out on is tying a service award to performance. It's an opportunity to highlight the wins, to show the contributions of an employee, and to thank them for everything they've done. And there's so many great ways to do that, to tie it back to performance. And we've seen that in our own organization here in Awardco.
Right. Yeah, we've got a couple products that we have, and there are lots of different options out there for you to automate things like this. But a modern recognition platform should entail the tracking, the trackability, and the reporting aspect of how many times someone is recognized. And a simple value-driven recognition program where you're driving behavior tied to your company values is really great to call up in a service award performance review and to bring that up and say, look at all the people you've touched. Look at all the wonderful work you've done over this time. And it's really gratifying. A personal story from my side. Wordco also has another product called a memory book, which is specifically a digital memory book. It's the easiest way to define it, where you can invite teammates to that that recognition. Excuse me, I'm getting over something. And I had mine last month. And so on my anniversary, I actually received this memory book with 20 or so comments from my peers and my leaders and my direct reports and everybody saying how much that I had affected them. And it really felt great for me. That's a form of performance review, because they're detailing what you excel at and how much you've contributed to the team and to the organization.
Yeah.
So anyway, just a couple of those things. But the generic advice I would give related to this is it's a mental shift, right? And it can be characterized in just one simple comparison. And I'm going to say this just out of just put it out there. Look how long you've been here, right? Okay, look how long you've been here. Focus on 5 years, 10 years. Look how long you've been here versus look at the impact you've had here. Look at the projects you've finished. Look at the people and the teams that you've served. Look at the roles you've fulfilled here. Wow. Look at all the ways you've impacted our company for good. Just a mental shift, not look how long you've been here.
Yeah, and it doesn't take much to do that. I think that originally service awards started out that way as a celebration of everything that an employee had accomplished. But with scale and with growth, sometimes that can get a little lost. That mental shift can change to oh boy, we gotta give them something. They've been here for so long. And so right. I really like what you said, Sam, that it can just be a mental shift. And you don't have to do it alone either. As an HR leader, you have people, you have managers that can help you do this, can help you personalize, can help you tie it to performance. So you're not alone. We want to reiterate that as well. So one thing we found with tying service awards to performance is that, right here, you can see this, another statistic, is that recognition tied to company values or the behavior you want to drive within your organization is 88% more effective in reinforcing those values. So for example, when we recognize here in AwardCo, we often will tie a recognition or tie a service award back to values that we have here internally. And a lot of times values in organizations are just, words on a wall, or they might be something you talk about occasionally in a big company-wide meeting. But if you don't tie those to performance, then those values get lost. They get lost in all the minutia of the day-to-day. But if you tie them to a recognition, to value to a recognition, that makes that recognition 88% more effective. That means you can drive behavior within your organization just by tying it to by tying recognition to values. And what better way to do that, and what better opportunity to do that than at a yearly service award? You can build a program and build a culture just from those service award recognitions, and you tie them back to your values.
Right.
So
retention is a once a year thing anyway, right? Yeah. It's an all year thing.
Absolutely. And Sam, before we kind of got on this webinar, we were talking about this, about how it's way easier to retain an employee, to make them feel valued, than it is to lose them and to have to go through the hiring process and the training process. And if it just takes a mental shift, like we talked about personalizing award or tying it to performance, there's almost no better way.
Totally.
Yeah. So here's the survival toolkit for our tip number 2. It is, you can audit the value an employee has brought to your organization. Now, whether you do that through talking to their manager, or if you know the employee personally, that's great. If you have a recognition platform that you use, you can look back through the recognitions that have been given to that person and kind of see, oh, look at all these projects they completed, or look what values they were exhibiting throughout the year. You can review the performance along with a service anniversary. It's a great time to reinforce the good in an employee, where you can say, look at all the great things you've done. We appreciate all your hard work. You've influenced this, you've influenced that. And so reviewing performance is a great way. And you can, again, reinforce those company values to help drive the behavior that you would like to see, and then provide specifics in the recognition. If you'd like to drive behavior, if you're not specific enough about it, you won't be able to drive that behavior. If you just say, hey, great job, that's good, but may not be driving what you want, right, Sam?
Right. Which brings up the next point. You kind of hinted at this, the discussion we had earlier about, maybe budget and other priorities, kind of putting the cart before the horse. But on the survival tip 3, we do recommend pretty heavily you celebrate more often than 5-year increments. And there's a lot wrapped up into this tip, which we're going to get into, but it all starts in the scariest of topics, which is taxes, right? And, cue lightning and thunder. Oh, yeah.
Taxes.
Right. I don't work in spreadsheets that often, and I try to avoid them as much as I can, but, they are necessary evil. but the introduction to this topic is that we have this tradition of celebrating service anniversaries on 5-year increments. And, many know this, many don't, but that is entrenched within the tax codes of the United States for those who are here in the United States. In that, there are tax incentives to recognizing your employees on 5-year increments. And if you choose not to do that, those gifts are taxed at a higher level. And that tax code was invented decades ago. That was written into law back when retention was a little bit more, maybe I wouldn't say easier, just say tenure. Tenure was longer. People stayed at companies much longer. And really, we're kind of coming at it from a different angle here, especially with millennials in the workforce, right, Bronson?
Yeah, absolutely. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is the median tenure for the workforce today. 4.1 years, regardless of age. Mm-hmm. That's the median tenure in any organization, and that's across industries as well. That doesn't even hit that 5-year mark. And then for millennials, I'm a millennial. I'm kind of in that range. And 50% of the workforce today is made up of millennials. And for millennials, the tenure is 2.8 years. That's the average tenure. And I don't think this is like shocking news for anyone. We all know that a lot of people change jobs, change careers, etc. But right. When seen in context of the service anniversary, and especially as we're talking about the 5-year increments and the implications with taxes, if you're waiting until 5 years to recognize someone for being with you for that long, that's probably about 4 years too late to recognize them. And so,
right.
Yeah, like as we continue to talk about that, you can see that other statistic, 56% of employees say that frequent recognition makes them much less likely to jump ship. And I can attest to that myself. When I feel recognized, when I feel appreciated, when I feel is something as simple as thanked, I am much more invested, whether that's at work or elsewhere in anything that I'm doing. And I think we can all kind of relate with that. But when we recognize more frequently, like you mentioned, Sam, and maybe you can expound on this a little bit if you have any other thoughts about it, but it helps with the retention, it helps with the productivity. There's so much there that it can help with.
Right. We often talk about this, Bronson. A year is a long time. I mean, just think about, especially what year we've gone through, right? The last 2 years. Just think about how long these last couple of years has been. And so sometimes we'll kind of give the millennials a hard time of like, man, these guys jump ship so often. Well, are they being treated any differently than any other employee? Are they feeling rewarded? And a year is a long time to give to any cause, correct? So what we're saying here is, again, recognizing more often in 5 years, taking a step back, history in HR and in rewards and recognition that has a standard that was created in the 70s of rewarding people every 5 years for the tenure. They won't get there. Most people won't get there, according to this stat. But yet we still hold true to we want the tax savings of that 5 year. So we're going to keep that. Let's just say we want to keep that $100 reward for the 5 year so we can save $10 on taxes or whatever that might be, right? Talk about putting the cart before the horse, right? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. If you want to keep that person and motivate them from year 1 to year 2, show them they were appreciated in year 1, that they were recognized, that they got a personal. Doesn't have to be a lot of money like your avocado.
Yep.
Hey, we see you. We know you contribute. So we're really advocating for putting people above tax policy, like the next slide says.
Yep. Yeah, and you can see our zombie Frankenstein guy here. He's a little upset. Yay, 5 years. You're absolutely right. If we're valuing people above tax policy, maybe we need to reevaluate a few things in our own organization and just see what we can do to better support the people that give us so much time. It's the majority of their day, almost every day. What are we doing to appreciate that a little more? So here's our survival toolkit for tip number 3. Recognize service anniversaries every year. Now, that doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to be a big event, but definitely recognize them and make them personal, and then tie them to performance, like those first 2 survival tips, right? You can use non-monetary rewards if tax implications are a concern, like we've been talking about. Build that sincerity and exclusivity and other value adds into your service awards. And just like you said, Sam, that's just a little bit of a mental shift to make service awards sincere, maybe a little bit exclusive. Like, whoa, yeah, that's amazing. I feel appreciated for being here for however long. And then you can automate those service anniversaries to make sure everyone is celebrated, because we understand that not everybody works at a smaller organization. Some of you watching this webinar might be HR leaders at a very large company with thousands of employees. And how can you possibly make every service anniversary personal? How can you tie it to values? I mean, that's a daunting task. But some of the way that you can help alleviate that is to automate the service anniversaries, either through a digital solution like Awardco or others, or just to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Because with a big organization, that is highly likely if you don't have a little bit of help in that area. So we're going to move on to our survival tip number 4. Provide more choice in the rewards, specifically, is what we mean with that. So with our survey with HR professionals, 57% of those professionals said that finding rewards team members value is one of the hardest parts about rewards and recognition. Because how can you know what someone's going to value if you aren't interacting with them on the daily? How do you know? Right. I mean, so there's a lot involved with that, right, Sam?
Exactly. And really, just if you want to know how difficult this is, or maybe you haven't had experience with it yourself, just think about the logistics of all the people on your team only, right? Maybe you're on a team of 5 to 10 people, and just look at what they value in their lives. Maybe one person's really into music, and one person's really into sports, and one person is really into work, right? And you don't know what else they value outside of work. Finding something that all of those personalities will look at and say, oh man, I'm really glad I work here. This is something I'm going to value for my whole life. It's really difficult. and I'm here to tell you that the traditional, the expected, that maybe has been grown to maybe a mandatory gift of the numeral, the pointy crystal, the something with your name on it, right? I have yet to interact with someone who I've asked, do you find that valuable? Most say no. In fact, I haven't had one say yes. I might be leading the witnesses because they know where I work and they know my opinion on the matter. But to back it up a little bit, one of Awardco's clients with a prior vendor did a survey and some research and found that 50% of those who received a physical object for their service award left it behind when they retired or ended up leaving the company. So we're talking people who were at the company 5, 10, 15, 20 years, left it behind because that's how much they valued the thing, right? And we're moving it much more into a workforce with millennials and others who value experiences and true rewarding things rather than objects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of begs the question, how do you know what everyone values, whether you're in a small organization or a large one? That's really hard, because you would have to get to know the person pretty closely in order to know exactly what they might value as a reward. So what do we like to say is, like with the survival tip number 4, provide more choice. That choice conveys value. When you offer employees the power to choose their own reward, that tells them that you value them and their own decisions and their own choices more than you selecting for them. And we understand that a lot of times the programs that you might be running or the vendors you're with may not allow for that choice. And that's, it's okay. It's like some choice is good. But what we're talking about is the most choice you can provide, it will be better for everyone, because then the employee will feel that value of an employee, and then an employee that feels cared for will care more about their job. We like to say that a lot internally at Awardco. It's kind of an employee that feels cared for will care more, but it's true. And one of the best ways that an employee feels cared for is when they have this choice. I think about like talking with my nieces or nephews. They're younger. And if you don't provide a choice, like an option, it's a lot harder for them to feel invested in whatever you're trying to get them to do, whether that's to like eat something or, I mean, Sam, you have kids, and have you ever experienced that as well? Like when you provide choice, then it's much more likely that you're like, no, okay, like someone will do something that someone will make that choice and feel a little more value from it, right?
Totally. Yeah. I completely agree with you. Choice means you value their opinion in what they want to do. And you're right. My kids are much more prone to do what I would like or to eat what I would like if I provide them a choice of what I want them to do within the range of choices that I would like to give them. And to bring the spooky angle in here, let's just say you're in a post-apocalyptic world and you're fighting off a horde of zombies. Would you want to fight that horde of zombies with, a toothbrush and a thing of Mentos, that the tool doesn't fit the job, right? How would you like to have a Costco at your disposal? Choose the right tool for the right job, right? And I guess to bring that back into HR, how would you like to fight off the evils of turnover and churn using, the pointy object we've talked about, right? You need choice. You need to be able to address every individual and allow them to get something they value, so that when I've used this before, this is an example, when they love running and they lace up those running shoes that their company got them, and those endorphins start firing in their mind when they're jogging, they think, I'm so glad I work where I work. They got me these shoes as part of my service award.
Yeah. And that's kind of funny you should mention that, because I did get shoes with part of a reward that I got from working here. So nice. I do understand that every time I put them on, I'm like, oh yeah, Workco got me these shoes. That's pretty awesome. But I had the power to choose that, which made it all the more valuable. So awesome. Here's our survival toolkit for tip number 4, provide more choice. So how can you provide more choice? Well, provide as much choice as possible. We understand that a lot of organizations may not allow for an outside vendor to provide those rewards, or that you might have too many employees to be able to provide the choice that you may want to provide. And we totally get that. Just try and provide as much choice as you can, and that will convey a better message to your employees. And then let your employees choose. Don't force a lackluster item or a reward on them that they may not want. Give them a choice, right? There's a psychological principle that it's easier to make a decision if you have 3 choices. 2 choices, it's hard to choose between 2. But if you throw a third in there, then that usually will reveal exactly what you're thinking and kind of where you want to go. So next time you're deciding on a place to eat, if you're trying to decide between 2, throw in 1 or 2 more, and then that'll tell you, oh, I actually really want to eat here. But that's the same way with rewards. Provide as much choice as possible so that you don't force a lackluster item or reward. And then offer a service that has more choice and 0 markups, so you can direct your spend back to employees. And of course, both Sam, you and I work here at Awardco, so it's a little bit of a plug. We don't want to, just have this webinar be all about Awardco, but Awardco does these things, can offer you that power of choice and 0 markups and direct your spend elsewhere, right?
Totally. Yeah. And the thing we want to impress upon you, above all in tip number 5 is you can start now. Nothing we've said thus far precludes you from just getting to work, right? And most of the people I think we're talking to have some service awards in some form or fashion, right? I mean, 71% if you're indicative of the rest of the research we've done. But a lot of the times, the things we hear back from HR leaders is, we're not getting executive buy-in. We can't get the inertia started within the organization. I can't get the budget I'm needing. And we have some tips here to just really simple tips to just get you started. And the first one is to just start with your own team, right? Mm-hmm. Start with your own team and start showing the value that something like this a service award program can convey without the budget and without the buy-in. It might be a little lonely at first to kickstart this program, but it's so much easier to get this, executive buy-in and to get some budget allocated if you don't have those things, by showing results before the fact. And starting small, doing what you can do, right, Bronson?
Yeah, it's kind of like providing a case study to your executive leadership of your own team. You can just
Right.
start with your team and try a few of these things. Personalize your awards a little bit more. Do them more than once every 5 years and see what that does to your team. Track the engagement, track the overall productivity or even happiness, even if it's anecdotal, can be really powerful within your own team. And the next thing you can do to start now is to make a special note of upcoming service anniversaries within your own team or outside of it, but to make sure that nobody is forgotten and that it's announced, whether in a company newsletter or a Slack channel or in a break room on an actual physical newsletter. You're like, here's who has been here for this long, so that other people can see and then celebrate with those people. That's something you can do right now. And another thing you can do right now, after you do it within your own team, you can train managers to celebrate and do that in their teams as well. You can just give them basic tips and your own learnings of what you did within your own team. And these are 3 things you can do like right now to increase the effectiveness of your service award program.
Right. And each of these things are very simple. I think that they're probably no-brainers as well. Well, train managers, of course, train managers. Yeah, but don't make a complicated program. Like, we need some consistency and we need some scalability across the organization. And as we're all aware on this call, the more complicated the process, the less it gets adopted. The less buy-in that people feel in a process, the less they're going to replicate the behavior, right? So if you're going to create a process on your team of recognizing people on their milestones, and it's a simple process with some real value and some sincerity, training managers to say, all it takes is for you to look at the upcoming month on the calendar that we've already created and specify which month, which day is an anniversary, put a calendar, meeting a day or 2 before, rally the troops if needed, have some conversations about what kind of food they like, what kind of lunch they like, what kind of store they might like, whatever you need to learn about them, and make it a moment. It doesn't take a lot of budget and it doesn't take a lot of forethought. In fact, you can start so small and the smallest changes can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like how you said that the smallest changes can make the biggest difference. Like, I mean, we've used this analogy throughout this webinar, but like the avocado, that's all it took for me, and it's because my manager knew me. So like we talked about, here's your survival toolkit to start now. Start now with what you have and just make it awesome. Make it so good. Make it really powerful as much as you can. And then start small. Just do it within your own team. You don't have to roll out a huge company-wide complicated program. Start small and then build off of that by training managers to celebrate their teams and training them and your own self to keep track of these service anniversaries and celebrate them company-wide just to make it a little bit more effective. There's a phrase that I heard once that I really like. It's better is good. You don't have to be amazing right off the bat. And with any endeavor, whether that's creative or whatever it is, just you got to start somewhere. And better is good. Just a little bit better. That's great. And then just keep building off of that. So here's your survival toolkit for the tip number 5. And Sam, you brought up something in this about how training managers doesn't have to be terribly complicated and that you can involve other people. You can bring in teams and you can learn about the people that way. You don't have to know every individual personally. That brings up our survival tip number 6. Involve more people in these service anniversaries so that A, you don't feel alone like you have to do it all, and B, it's more effective because more people get involved and more people are excited about it and like, oh, they're celebrating their service anniversary. They might love this and something like that. So to dive into this one, this is our last survival tip here. SHRM conducted a recent survey where 57% of organizations found that peer participation in recognition improved engagement. So with service anniversaries, that's involving more people. That's the way to go. That is the ticket for this. And Sam, maybe you could kind of illuminate us as why we have the spooky angle to aliens here, involving more people.
Right. Yeah. So I guess the question for all of us is how many people feel like complete aliens on our teams or complete foreigners, foreign to the organization because people don't know us. The chances are there are very few people in your organization who don't know, get along with, or hang out with other people in the organization who know them well, right? And to further the analogy, every ET has an Elliot, right? And whether you know the person or not, and in depth, enough to give them a personalized, meaningful service award, there are people that do. And so just broadening that net and asking the questions of, hey, Susan's service award is coming up, and I know you guys go to lunch. Tell me about Susan. What could we do that would make things valuable to her? Or how would you like to highlight her? Maybe she is an introvert and she doesn't have a lot of super in-depth relationships in the organization, but she has a couple, and maybe she doesn't like public recognition. Oh, great. Well, that sincerity will come through in a more private way because you've respected the way that she likes to do things, and that a public recognition may not be for her. So we're really just trying to make sure everybody feels welcome, and we're not feeling like aliens. We all feel like human beings who are seen by one another.
Yeah. And that kind of harkens back to some of these other tips we've talked about personalizing, about, involving more people and making all these service awards, tying back to values and things like that. So here's your survival toolkit to involve more people. Get to know the people around you as much as you can, and then learn what people might appreciate for a reward. That's usually pretty straightforward once you start to get to know them a little bit. And if you don't have time, or you're not sure how to get to know the people, like you said, Sam, there's usually somebody or a handful of people within the organization that at least talks to this person on a regular basis and might know and how they might appreciate a reward or recognition. So involve team members in recognition, like we were talking about just there, and then automate. We said this once before. Automate them if you can. So that can help a lot in big organizations. And also a little bit even in remote work situations where if you can't get to know someone super well, that can be a little bit difficult. So it might require a little bit more effort, but at the very least, if it's automated, they will at least feel like someone notices and they're not lost, in the ether of remote work, like some people might feel. Yeah.
Right.
So
wonderful. I think that kind of wraps up the tips, but we do have some time. Go ahead, Bronson.
Yeah. So we'd like to kind of turn the time over back to Mike to help us with some of the questions. We've been looking at these questions coming through in the Q&A. We're excited to talk about them with you. Both Sam and I can hopefully help answer some of those and shed some more light and kind of spur some more thought and discussion. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind kind of helping us out here, and we can kind of dive into that Q&A a little bit.
Very good. And we will turn to audience questions in just a moment. SHRM thanks AwardCo for sponsoring this program and SHRM series of free webcasts. Everything you love about Amazon is now available for rewards and recognition through AwardCo and its unique partnership with Amazon Business. This powerful relationship allows AwardCo to bring millions of reward choices, lower vendor fees, and dollar-for-dollar recognition spend to your organization. More choice, more capability, and less spend, all in one simple platform. To learn how AwardCo can help you consolidate your recognition programs under one roof and offer millions of rewards options to your employees with zero markups, visit award.co. All right, let's turn to some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. We'll start here. Audience member asks, how can you make service awards more personal if you're managing a large organization of, say, 50 or more?
That's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead, Bronson. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I think I saw the spark in your eye. It looks like you.
Well, I think we touched upon that, right? In fact, let me touch upon this real fast. Usually with a small organization, the biggest concerns are our budget, right? And buy-in. Like, we don't want to do things that are going to, quote unquote, waste company time or resources. And if we don't have that top-down approach, then it just doesn't happen. So in a small organization, the great news, which we didn't touch upon as heavily in this presentation, is that non-monetary recognition is just as powerful as monetary recognition. And that value can be communicated in many ways. And we've touched upon a few of them: sincerity, exclusivity, choice, public recognition if the person so chooses or is voiced liking that, right? That's even easier in many ways in an organization of 50 to 75. It wouldn't be a stretch for me to say, as an HR leader in an organization of that size, you likely should know each of those people. You may not have lunch with every single one of them, but you know who they are. And in an organization that small, their team is likely more close knit. And I say this coming from an organization of Awardco. I joined, we were 20 people, and we're now up to 240. And I can't keep all the people straight at 240. I know them by sight, but I don't know them well. So anyway, that's the great news. So much to build on positively in a small organization, to build sincerity into those events, if you would like to call them up, in front of the team, in front of the organization, being able to give them something that is meaningful to them that doesn't cost a lot of money, like an avocado. So anyway, I think we touched upon that fairly well. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Bronson.
The only thing I would add to that, along with the sincerity and the personalization touch, is timeliness of the recognition. When you're in a small organization and you're giving recognitions, if you wait too long and to highlight someone for their contribution, like if you're only giving service awards at the end of the year for everybody, that might not be enough time to convey what you want it to convey. So doing it within a timely manner can often really help communicate that recognition, that non-monetary recognition, especially just a quick, and once you notice somebody doing something, a quick thank you. This was amazing. The specificity of it can really be helpful.
I think we received more versions of this question than any other one. If you had not had formal recognition in the past, and you decide now to start a program, how do you handle employees who might feel slighted that they didn't get the same recognition when they had their one-year anniversary?
That's a really good question. That is a tough one. I'm not sure that because budgetary constraints would make it difficult to go back and therefore reward everyone retroactively. I can definitely understand that. Sam, what solutions have you seen some of our clients or in your experience that have tackled that?
Sure. Typically, what I've seen is that there is a somewhat of a shoring up that has to happen, because you can't add value when no value was there to begin with, right? So let's just say you have a specific budget for that going forward. It's going to be a lot easier with the retention numbers that you have and the employee numbers that you have. A service award program is a fairly dependable budgetary item, which is great, right? You can plan that out in the future and say, we know based on our current retention numbers that we're going to have X number of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, right? And so you can build that out, which is wonderful. That's a great thing. The great thing about time is it always marches on in the same orderly fashion. But most of the clients that we've seen who have started or kickstarted a program have had to include a shoring up period, where the people who are valuable on your team and didn't get the 1 year or didn't get the 3 year, they do need to be offered something. And the good news here too is that it's not necessarily a dollar for dollar care. They just need to know that they're being accounted for, right? And so often, let's just say your budget's, $10,000 a year, just to make a nice easy number. You might have to devote a couple thousand at the beginning on that kickstart to catch everyone up, and then let them know this is something we're doing from this point on. We'd love to highlight everyone for the last 20 years. It's just not as doable. It's kind of impossible to do that, but we want to let you know that we value you, and here is our offer, of thanks. The bigger the organization, the harder it is to truly shore that up. And so there's a lot of technicalities there, a lot of details that I'm glossing over a little bit. We'd love to have a conversation with people about this, because it is a serious concern that needs to be addressed within that organization.
Mm-hmm.
Another audience member asked, do you have any ideas for a company that's mostly remote, where celebrating milestones is just another video meeting?
Yeah, definitely. One thing that we love to do that we've touched upon here in this webinar a couple times is what we call memory books. It's a digital way to celebrate these service anniversaries. And if everyone is remote, celebrating can be really difficult. I mean, You might get together on a Zoom call and share a remote meal together. I've seen that and experienced that, and that still has a worthwhile place in celebrating and highlighting people. But another way that you can do it is to do something like these memory books, where you compile memories from people, or just anecdotes, or expressions of thanks, or highlights of certain achievements or accomplishments. Compile them together in some fashion and then present it to the person. That can be really valuable. Even though it's digital, it can still be just as valuable as something that might be more physical. And another thing you might consider doing is sending something to the person, a physical item. Just putting together some of their favorite things and then shipping it off to them. That's another way that you might be able to help them out with that.
Yep, we use bonus boxes. That's what we call these. This product. It's a nice way to create a consistent experience across an organization that's fully remote, where everybody does get the same unboxing experience and they get the items that you've chosen, so that you get the nice consistent experience even though they're remote. But then we usually recommend that you bundle that with some form of choice. We do send cards in the bonus box, so they get whatever you just determine, whether that's a blanket or a mug or a award or whatever you think should go in there. So they get that, and then they also get their choice. And if your company's fairly local, it's very easy to time that correctly to get it there on the right day. It might take a little bit of logistical, maneuvering to make sure that people get that in a timely manner. But that's been the best successes that we've seen, is for fully remote, bringing in a consistent experience in the form of a deliverable box experience.
Yeah. And when an employee receives that, it's pretty remarkable, because they're like, whoa, there's a physical thing here, and it's a nice unboxing experience. So that can have a big impact.
Awesome.
And we have kind of the opposite question, too, of you who are asked, what if my company or team isn't attached to a computer for the majority of their time at work? How can I involve them in service awards that are more meaningful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of manufacturing clients, right?
Yeah, that I was going to say, Sam, that brings up the thought of our manufacturing clients and how some of the solutions we presented to them, like we have an app, because a lot of people still have a phone and that they can use. Then we also have other solutions where they may not be attached to the hip with a computer or something, but they can still recognize and reward via other solutions. Like I know that some of our manufacturing clients have used that, right, Sam?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things my thoughts go towards is, for whatever reason, we need to do some research about this. I've found that the employees that bond together over a non-white collar, sit down at a computer with their headphones on work environment, who are truly in the trenches, and whether it's manual labor or it's a manufacturing line work or whatever, they tend to bond together well in the off times, where they are eating together, where they do get to know each other's families. And I need to do more research into this, but the great news for manufacturing clients is that the people they work with is usually a tighter knit nucleus than maybe other organizations and departments in the company. So that means, how do we get that value being brought down to those who aren't at a computer all the time? That event to celebrate the service award, if they are a public recognition person, can be so much more meaningful. It's like literally having their family there, and heck, include their family there. Right? That would be one example. It just is so much. Again, I don't know why, but it's so much easier with those construction, manufacturing, and those types of positions. There's this sincerity that is imbued in the team of, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can squeeze in one more question here, and actually let me put together two separate questions that came in but are related. One viewer asking, what do you think about surveys to see what everyone values? We're a company of 17. Another person who does not specify their company size asks, what do you think about us, that is HR, asking employees what they like and dislike?
I would say right off the bat that we are big proponents of asking employees through surveys or any other means what they would value, because that in and of itself conveys value. If you are asking them what they would like as a reward, that immediately tells them you're thinking about them and you're listening. So we're big proponents of using surveys to find out what employees would value. Yeah.
I was going to say, bringing this into the personal, anyone on this webinar who has any sort of personal relationship with another human being, if you don't know their love language, you will fail every time, right? I mean, this is a form of love language. If you don't know that, go home and have the conversation with your loved one on what their love language is, because how are you going to meet expectations if you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way it works in the survey. You've got to supply your workers and your employees with things they value. Otherwise, they'll think, I just gave 5 years of value to this company, and all I got was this, crummy T-shirt. Which maybe we need to make those T-shirts, but you know what I mean. They'll feel disingenuous and not valuable.
Yeah, and to the other question about what do we think about HR asking those questions? I think it should be HR asking those questions, and if not HR, then definitely managers who communicate back to HR. And I don't feel like it violates any sort of HR code or anything about just asking what people might value as a reward. You can give options like, here's what we're thinking of offering, which ones you would find the most valuable. And that's going to be huge for your employees, just to be able to understand that they are being listened to.
Well, thank you. We are coming to the end of this program. Before we sign off, we want to thank Sam Stroman and Bronson Dameron from Awardco for the information they provided today. And we also want to thank everyone tuning in for being with us and for choosing SHRM for HR webcasts. That concludes this program.